Welcome back to BPM Live. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Ian Hawkins. I'm the editor of the PEX Network here at IQPC Digital, and I'm delighted to have you with us today at the Online Summit. We're here with our final session looking at Siemens' fast lane to RPA success with Celonis. My guest today is Anthony Dayton, who will be looking at how to assess and prioritize target processes to get started with RPA, how process mining lets you get started with a pilot program, and then supports rolling out a full-scale RPA deployment, and how to sustain and ensure true end-to-end benefits through your RPA program by continuously monitoring automation within processes. Let me tell you a little bit about our speaker today. Anthony Dayton is the leader of the Global Marketing and Communication Strategy at Celonis, and he will head the team responsible for driving the rapid market adoption of Celonis' powerful process mining software that organizations use to drive digital transformation initiatives. Anthony previously served as Chief Technology Officer and SVP of Products at Quillic, as well as General Manager of Siebel ERM. He holds an MBA with high distinction from Harvard University and a bachelor's degree in Mathematics and Economics from Northwestern University. So do throw in your maths and economics questions as well. As we always do through these sessions, please remember to ensure the session is super interactive and write your questions in the Q&A box on the left of your screen. So if there's a question for Anthony, pop it in there. And if it's a technical problem, the slides don't work, you can't hear us, anything like that, you can also put those in the Q&A box. And the IQPC team, who are sitting quietly in the background, will leap on your problems and get them resolved as soon as possible. All that said, Anthony, are you ready to take the stage?
Certainly am. Thank you.
Good. Then I will hand over to you, Anthony, and have a great session.
Oh, thank you very, very much. Thank you for that kind introduction. What I would like to share with everyone today are a couple of important points. So first, I'll give you a bit of an introduction to Celonis, how we think about our product and strategy. Then I'm going to share with you some of the details of how Celonis process mining technology works in conjunction with RPA to really help enable business transformation. Then I'm actually going to show you a live demonstration of exactly that process. So we'll actually show you live in the software how we can work RPA and how we can work with Celonis process mining technology and actually enable that business transformation. And I'll share with you the business case story with Siemens, a lot of the details of how they worked with Celonis and how they worked with RPA to really change and transform their business. So with that, let's jump into it. So we'll start with a little bit about how we see the industry shifting and changing. And there are two primary economic drivers that are affecting everyone on this call today. Number one is changing customer expectations. And number two is changes in how we can drive productivity. So from a customer perspective, we've all come to expect a kind of instant-on experience. So we hail an Uber, and if you're sitting there watching your phone and the Uber says it's going to take 8 minutes, you go completely bananas. And 8 minutes to wait for an Uber when, not but a few years ago, you were waiting 20, 30 minutes for a taxi. You'd be lucky if they showed up at all. Or you go to stream a show on Netflix and it buffers for 20 seconds, and this is a terrible disaster. When, before you had to drive to a video store, check out the movie, etc. So this idea that we want to have, as consumers, we want to have an instant-on experience. And we want to have a high-quality experience. So it's not enough just to get it quickly. We want exactly the right thing. And we want that done with transparency and authenticity. Now, those are what we expect as consumers, but those consumer expectations affect our experience from a B2B perspective. So our customers, our economic buyers, now expect that same experience that they have in their consumer lives in their business-to-business life. On the productivity front, the same trick we've used historically to drive productivity in our businesses, which is to move low-cost or low-value work to low-cost delivery labor markets, simply doesn't work anymore. Labor rates around the world are equalizing, and let me be clear, this is a wonderful thing. This is tremendous for the world, but it's tough for business because it means we can't simply look for low-cost labor to drive productivity. We need to find new ways to drive productivity, and simply put, we need to do more with less. And this creates what we call the transformation imperative. And what this means is, simply put, every organization in the world needs to find new ways to do their business or run the risk of being like a Fortune 500 company in 1955 and not innovating and changing, not transforming, and then going out of business. So the pace of change in today's world is only increasing, and the need to change is only becoming more important. And yet, change is really difficult. So we've organized our companies into silos. So we've created a manufacturing department, an accounting department, we have a sales organization, or a logistics department, and our people are organized into these departmental silos. And at the same time, we've actually created silos of information. So we've used systems within these departments to manage and maintain the process within that department. So we have a sales system, we have a logistics system, a manufacturing planning system, right? An accounting system, et cetera. So we have silos of humans, silos of human capital, of people. We have silos of systems that we use to manage those silos. And at the same time, we then put analytics in place in each of those silos with the idea that if we measure something within that silo, that somehow will make it improve. So we'll take a look at a particular metric within a silo, so an accounting completion rate, for example, and we'll measure and monitor that on a dashboard. And the idea that if we simply deployed more dashboards, we would get better performance out of our organization. And a quick customer story that I think really highlights this. We had a customer at Celonis, and they spent millions of dollars to re-engineer. This is a distributor, so a distributor holds stock of product, which they then take orders and ship out of their stock. They spent millions of dollars to look at the logistics within their warehouse to automate the way they were picking items out of inventory. So think about things like robots, literal robots, not virtual robots, picking items out of the inventory. And they were able to get their pick process down from several hours to several minutes, which is a fantastic improvement. But when they looked at that end-to-end process, they realized they actually wasted days in their credit check process in their accounting department. So they'd spent all this time and energy optimizing in a single silo in logistics in their warehouse, when in fact the real opportunity existed in their accounting department. And the reason for that is they weren't evaluating this process from an end-to-end perspective. And that's precisely what Celonis allows you to do. So Celonis allows you to look end-to-end from a customer-in perspective into your business process, whether that business process is order to cash, or purchase to pay, or customer service. In a way, it doesn't matter. What matters is you're able to look at that from a process perspective rather than a functional silo perspective or a systems perspective. Because what we find is that most processes cut across silos and cut across systems in order to provide real value. Now, how do we do that from a sort of technical and technology perspective? The Celonis product is built on what we call process mining technology. So what process mining is a technology which looks at what we call the digital footprints in your underlying operational systems. So we look at the systems that your company runs on, right? Think about things like Oracle ERP or SAP or ServiceNow, Ariba, Salesforce, or even custom systems in many cases. We look at those systems that your business runs on, and we watch how the data changes. So the flow of data through those operational systems. So as users interact with this system, as APIs interact with that system, they leave footprints in the system in terms of how they're actually working with it. And from that, we are able to derive the underlying business process that created that data. So that process mining technology allows Celonis to uncover the real business process at the core of every system, and then tie that to a powerful analytic capability to understand how those processes affect your business. And when you can understand your processes, then you're in a position to affect real change in your business. And that's exactly what Celonis customers are doing. And they're doing it across a wide range of business processes. So processes like order to cash at Siemens, which is a story we'll talk about in detail today, where they're actually saving tens of millions of dollars a year through automating manual activities within their order to cash process. Or if you take an example like Vodafone, which took in their procure to pay process, were able to drive the perfect PO from 73% of the time to 87% of the time, or drive touchless invoices up 63% to 63%. Well, these are tremendous value to how they think about those underlying business processes. So when you think about business transformation, what Celonis is really doing is connecting the operational systems that you use to run your business with the mechanisms for change in that business. There are three primary mechanisms that anyone can actually transform or change their business. You can change how people work, the human change inside your business. So you can actually change what they're doing on a day-to-day basis through things like training or augmented work. You can change the underlying systems that they're using. They can shift the technology that they're working on, right? Migrating or collapsing underlying operational systems, et cetera. And you can change the process. So you can actually change the way the process is done, harmonizing between different plants or harmonizing between different groups, or putting in place automation on that underlying process. So Celonis is really the glue between the underlying operational systems that you run your business on and the mechanisms of change or transformation that we have as business leaders to change those to those businesses. And relevant for this presentation and this webinar is how RPA, or robotic process automation, fits into that. So again, one mechanism of affecting change in your business is to automate an underlying process. And traditionally, automation has been incredibly difficult because back-end automation tends to be driven by IT departments. It tends to take a long time. It tends to require heavy upfront investment in order to achieve. Where RPA has become incredibly successful is it provides a mechanism for what we call front-end automation. So this can be a business-driven process for automating a common business process. It allows you to derive value really quickly. However, it's important when you apply RPA to automating a process that we watch and monitor that process to make sure that we're getting the value out of it that we expected to. And we see RPA as being most effective when it's targeted at highly repetitive human activities, the kinds of things we would typically do through our desktop as a human being, where the process that we're attempting to automate has relatively low variation, or is a fairly standard process across the underlying IT systems, and where it's relatively standardized and mature. So if you're in a situation where processes are changing very frequently, where the underlying system is changing very frequently, or where there's a mix of automation and human activities, those typically are not good candidates for an RPA automation opportunity. So RPA is a fantastic new tool, which kind of, in a sense, democratizes the process of automation, but it isn't the solution to every single automation task that's out there. We really need to focus that powerful new tool across the right sets of processes to be automated. And I think this is best summed up by your friend and mine, Bill Gates, where he said that automation, when you apply it to an efficient operation, becomes even more efficient. But when it's applied to an inefficient operation, it can magnify that inefficiency. And this is something we've seen consistently in our customers. We've seen it around the world, where it's really not a question of simply automating everything, right? In fact, first figuring out where the best places to apply automation are, and also making sure that that which you're automating is in fact an optimized or optimal process. And so this, I think, creates the bridge between the first part of this presentation and where we are today with where we are now with RPA, is how do we think about the application of process mining technology in the context of robotic process automation. And so we think about that as applying across the automation journey. So as you think about the automation journey, where process mining technology can be incredibly valuable is that it helps you analyze your as-is processes. It helps you figure out how to improve those processes, that we're not optimizing something, that we're not automating something that's not optimized. It allows you to actually set goals and understand the potential and build a business case for applying and using RPA technology, which I know is something that everyone on this call, I'm sure, is struggling with. Then it lets you pick the right automation solution. So which bots should you actually be using? And I think critically, allows you to monitor and scale up an automation initiative. So you can start with a particular, say, department, and then scale that up. And also watch that automation over time and make sure that RPA bot continues to deliver value as you expected it. So if you think about the RPA journey, where we see value for Celonis process mining technology is across the RPA value chain. So thinking at the beginning, discovering the automation potential. So we've actually built technology in the Celonis product, and I'll show that to you very shortly, which lets you scan the underlying systems and identify the potential points of automation, where RPA would be most valuable. And that, of course, allows you to build the business case, to show to management where you could apply RPA technology and get the most bang for the buck. And lets you start with those high value, high potential use cases. Once you're implementing the bots, we've actually built technology with Celonis for what we call click discovery, allowing you to actually understand not only how the underlying systems respond to the business process, but actually how the user's desktop, how the actions on the user's desktop apply to that business process. And that's really powerful about this is you can actually bring those two worlds together. You can see what people are doing on their desktop. You can actually see the effect, the micro business process on the desktop married with the broader underlying system business process. So you can watch as a user enters an order, for example, and see what clicks occurred on the desktop. And that allows you to implement the best, most effective, most comprehensive RPA implementation. Third, monitoring. So, or rather, not monitoring, triggering actions. So with the Celonis process mining technology, since we uniquely understand the underlying business process, we can help the bot know the best place to perform the automated action and not apply the bot in cases where it would actually be an inefficient process. So the linkage between the underlying business process, the Celonis process mining technology, and the bot allows you to be optimized when you apply the bot to that process. And last but not least, monitoring and scaling, allowing you to make sure that you're getting value out of the RPA initiative. So watching the RPA initiative over time, watching that business process over time, and ensuring that you're actually getting back that business value that you expected when you applied the bot to that process. So that's it in PowerPoint. Let's take a second and actually show you how this works in real life. So let me switch over and share with you my screen. And just validate that we're looking at my screen. All right. Yep. All right. Excellent. So what I thought I would start with from a demo perspective is a kind of before and after for a real world customer example of someone who used RPA technology with Celonis in the context of their purchase to pay process. So what you're looking at is a real implementation looking at how we could apply RPA technology to purchase to pay. So what you're looking at is what we call the Process Explorer. And in this Process Explorer, we're looking at the purchase to pay process. So you can see, for example, at the beginning of the process, we make a request for an item, we create a purchase order, we send the purchase order out, we get the items, scan the invoice and book the invoice, right? So pretty much what you would expect from an underlying purchase-to-pay process. And again, this is sort of the value of Celonis. We've looked at the underlying digital footprint in this in the systems that manage the purchasing process in this organization, and we're able to show the most common case, the most common, what we would call variant, the most common case in which we do a purchasing process. But of course, that's not the only way we do a purchasing process. There's more variation in this process. We can sort of start looking at variation. And the first most common variant, the second most common variant, is that we create the purchase order item without having created a requisition, right? Which I'm sure everyone on this call has purchasing examples of where somebody creates the purchase order item, but they didn't actually create the requisition. Another variation, so for example, we send out the purchase order and then somebody changes the price. Right? We realized we needed a slightly, we had a negotiated discount, or for some reason we changed the price. And you can sort of step through literally every variation in this process and understand exactly what's going on, up to and including literally every possible flow through this purchasing process. But if we focus on the most common variant, the other powerful capability in the process mining technology is to look at the automation rate. So because in the underlying system, we can see exactly who took each step in this process. We can also tell you whether that step was taken by a human being or by an RPA bot or by an API. And you can see when I turn on the automation rate that in this particular customer case, sending purchase orders was pretty, fairly automated, right? Green. But creating purchase requisition items and purchase order items was not very automated. So this is what the system looked like before the application of RPA technology. Now, if I switch this window and look at this next window, this is what happened afterwards. So before, we have an automation rate of about 44% and a cycle time of 31 days for the entire purchase-to-pay process. After, with bots in place, there was an automation rate of 86%, and the cycle time was down by almost half, 16 days. But here's what's really exciting. When you look at this automation rate, you can see that the rate is significantly more automated. There's only a few steps left for them to apply automation technology. And I think this is really exciting, when you looked at the variation in the process, you can see that previously, the third most common variant was we changed the price, right? You can see that before. After, the change price case doesn't make it into the top three. Much less common to see changes in price. And that makes perfect sense, because now that we've automated the creation of the requisition item and the order item, the probability that we're using the wrong price, the wrong master data, much lower, and then we're getting double benefit. We're getting benefit because the cycle time is shorter, also getting benefit because we're doing more perfect POs. So how were they able to achieve these kinds of results? Well, they used the Celonis technology. Let me show you the tool that they used in Celonis to be able to understand both the value of applying RPA technology, but also where they should apply, exactly where they should start. So here you can see a very similar purchase-to-pay process. And on the right, we've actually built into the tool a calculator for building that business case for applying this technology. So for example, you can see we have what user type is manual and what the automation potential is for a given process. So let's say we could automate 60% of the tasks. The system will actually calculate based on how long it takes to do each task. And 5 minutes, there's no way it's 5 minutes. They can make it 9 minutes. So if it's 9 minutes, right, with this salary and this number of working weeks, we can save, just by automating a particular step in this process, over 9 million euros. So we actually have a business calculator based right into the software. But where should you apply where should you start? So if we look at the overall process, you can see up here on this scatter plot, we're looking at both what is the rate of automation, so how much of it's manual, and how many activities occur. So what we want to focus RPA bots on are places where we have a very high manual rate, meaning we're often doing it in a manual way, but we also do it many times. So something that happens infrequently, but is manual, is not that big a deal, not where you want to start. But something that happens frequently and is highly manual is exactly where we want to start. And you can see, for example, creating the purchase order item was the most manual activity of this organization. So we can go ahead and sort of zero in on creating the purchase order item. And now the second important point is you want to automate with RPA a process which has relatively little variation in it. Remember, we talked about this in the PowerPoint. We want something that has a few, relatively few kind of inbound steps. And every time you create a purchase order item, it's because someone created a requisition, right? There are other cases, right? But they represent relatively small number of the purchases, right? And those are probably the ones you can dig into and find other ways to solve. But the vast majority of purchase order items are created when a purchase requisition item is created. And so we can actually look at exactly those. And when we do that, we immediately get a calculator which shows us exactly the value of not just automating every possible task in this organization, in this purchase-to-pay process, but specifically the most high-value one. And we can start looking at variation there. So for example, just quickly showing, if we look at the purchase document type, we can see that the standard purchase order is the most common purchase order, which is the most unauditable or most manual task, and the place where the highest value would be derived from applying RPA bot. So all of a sudden, from a universe of possible places to apply RPA technology, we've literally zeroed in on the single high-value RPA bot that we could create together, and in live, in real time, built a business case for doing so. And that's precisely how this organization was able to look at the purchase-to-pay process and move that process from highly unautomated to highly automated and remove variation in that process. So let me shift back to the presentation and talk a little bit about how this all comes together, and in particular, how it comes together with our customer, Siemens. So just quickly to recap, we showed with in the demo, the RPA assessment application, which allows you to quickly and easily understand where there is automation possibility and potential, in particular to focus energy around the high-value actions and activities that we can take for RPA. It allows you to actually implement better bots. I didn't show the click discovery capabilities. It actually allows you to tie what's happening on the desktop to what's happening in the underlying business process. And as we showed in the before and after, allowing you to monitor and scale the work you're doing from an RPA perspective, make sure you're actually getting value out of the initiative that you put in place. And I should be careful and clear and say that our partnership around RPA for Celonis extends to all of the major players in the RPA space. So we don't require a specific RPA implementation. In fact, quite the contrary, we're working with all the major vendors and have good and strong partnerships, and there's a lot of great detail we can go into here if we need to with each of the major players. So let's shift gears slightly and talk a bit about the story at Siemens. And the story at Siemens is really a story about how we can marry the powerful process mining technology from Celonis to understand the overall business process and where there's opportunity for improvement with automation and RPA. And the story of Siemens begins, if you can believe it, in 1847, and with the invention of the telegraph. And Siemens as a business really began as this kind of startup type mentality. So the telegraph was a disruptive technology, really changed the communication industry, and built a great business. But from that startup in a garage, the organization has grown tremendously. So today, Siemens as a business is over 85 billion, highly profitable, with literally hundreds of thousands, nearly 300, a little over 300,000 employees all around the world. But that startup mentality at Siemens is strongly still in place. So last year, they filed over, and I found this fact to be amazing, over 3,600 patents. And I love this picture. This is the Siemens headquarters, and that is in fact the literal garage in which the telegraph was invented. they've actually preserved and maintained the workshop where the telegraph was invented. So the point here is this is a large company with a high degree of complexity, but still has an innovative heart, is looking for ways to make their organization improve and be better. And if you look at their value chain from purchase to pay to make to deliver to order to cash, there's tremendous complexity in that value chain. You know, from a purchase to pay perspective, they literally do business with hundreds of thousands of suppliers. From a make to deliver perspective, they operate across over 100 independent plants, manufacturing plants, all around the world, different geographies. And from an order to cash perspective, they have millions of customers. And you can take the combination of millions of customers, hundreds of plants, and hundreds of thousands of suppliers. The complexity here is phenomenal, such that it is the key focus of Joe Kaeser, the CEO. Like, this is the #1 issue for him to think about how you can manage complexity. I want to be careful, not eliminate complexity, because a lot of that complexity creates competitive advantage, but how you can manage that complexity. And so where Siemens has been working with Celonis is across a couple of the same critical business processes. So from a purchase to pay perspective, they look at the purchase orders that come through the system, look for changes in price, changes in quantity, so that they can make sure to find and eliminate those. And another key area for them on purchase to pay was looking at payment terms and making sure they're optimizing when and how they pay their suppliers. From a make to deliver perspective, they have well over 1,000 users that use Celonis in the make to deliver process, particularly looking at things like delivery reliability. Since they have over 50 million deliveries a year, you know, there's a real opportunity to think about making sure those deliveries are on time, in full, et cetera. And from an order to cash perspective, they literally can trace the process behind every single order that moves through that business process. And that's precisely where they spend a lot of time and energy around RPA, because one of the things that was true in their order to cash process is they identified significant opportunity for automation. So sort of digging into this order to cash opportunity at Siemens, Siemens looked at the order to cash process, recognized that there was room for automation. They were able to look at the underlying activities, see where they were complex, where they were common, what degrees of automation they had, where there was significant rework, and understand how they could take some of those key processes and build RPA bots to automate them. And there are a couple of key questions that Siemens tells us they used as part of that process. So and I should add that a lot of these questions are exactly what we use as part of the Celonis RPA Scout to be able to understand where to apply RPA technology. And in fact, you saw those in the demo. So the first question is, which activities are performed manually that could be performed by a bot? And secondarily, how many of those manual activities could in fact be substituted by a robot? Remember, looking for activities which have relatively little variation in how they're performed, therefore could be easily automated. And then building a business case. So what can we expect in terms of time and money to be saved when we apply the RPA technology? And so and here's a screenshot of their use of Celonis in the context of just this one use case to discover automation potential. And again, they used this tool to figure out where they could apply RPA technology, which tasks were being done manually, which ones could have been substituted by a robot, and how much real hard dollar savings they could derive as a result. So needless to say, the application of RPA technology at Siemens has been a success, but it's been a success because it's been a part of a broader initiative to apply process mining technology to be able to understand and transform the Siemens business. So there's a great quote here from one of the kind of key customers for us at Siemens. indicating RPA is a great companion to the process mining to drive further automation. And they're deriving significant business value from the application of this technology. So eliminating tens of millions of manual activities and millions of dollars on an annual basis in hard dollar cost savings. So just to sort of sum this up, from our perspective, how you make the RPA journey a success is that you apply and use process mining technology from Celonis as part of the full value chain in the RPA journey, from identifying where to apply the RPA technology, to building a business case for that application, from monitoring and managing the success over time. So with that, I'm sure there's some Q&A in the panel, or in the Q&A panel, and I'm certainly open to any of those questions.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Anthony. It's Ian here again. Just a quick apology to those of you, and I believe there have been quite a few who've had some trouble following the slides. We have had a couple of technical problems here on 24, so it might be useful. We are going to be putting out a recording of this, and we will obviously check that recording and make sure that all the slides are exactly where they should be. So if you feel like you've missed anything, by all means come back, and on the PEXnetwork.com we'll be getting up the recording of today's session as quickly as we can, so that you can go through and make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row on this. And of course, Anthony, you're open to taking questions and things as well after the session, aren't you, Anthony? I know you're quite easy to get hold of on LinkedIn. So a couple of questions that have come in, and the first of all is from just somebody who's rather cryptically called themselves IC, but they say, how small can an organization be to benefit from Celonis' solution?
Sure. So we see organizations from obviously very large, like Siemens, all the way down to smaller, even mid-market organizations benefiting from process mining technology. So to be clear, every organization has processes. So every organization performs work using a business process, and we all use underlying digital systems to track and manage those processes. So those are all valuable cases in which process mining technology can be valuable. Having said that, small organizations often have much more variation in the process because they're still learning and inventing their business. And so in a way, process mining, as it relates to automation, is even more valuable because the chances of falling victim to Bill Gates's quote, and in fact, spending time automating a process which likely will change or has high levels of variation is very high. And so in a way, process mining is highly valuable there. Now, part of the reason we use a case like Siemens as a business case to share with you in a webinar like this is they represent the other extreme, which is a really large organization that has huge amounts of process, huge amounts of data volumes, and true sort of enterprise needs. And so, again, I see applications of the technology across both.
Okay, because my assumption on this is that it does tend to be the preserve of the bigger legacy organizations. I guess everyone's terrified that a small, agile little startup is going to come along and do something completely different. I mean, the smaller the business is, the easier it is to put something completely different in place, isn't it? Sure.
But again, I think the process mining technology at the core of Celonis is valuable regardless of the size of your organization. So again, big company, small company, there's always a digital footprint for us to understand the underlying process. Again, in a way, I think automation in that context, that's where the real question comes. Like, when do you want to automate a process if there's high levels of variation or if it's not very manual? Or where to start? Like, those are questions that are quite different across those.
Sure, and in fact, Michael Zetzman has been in touch to say, with Celonis, I can only analyze my already digitized processes. What about all the semi-manual activities?
Yeah, so that's where we see the application of some of the technology we're working on literally as we speak around looking at the click stream on the desktop. So we can actually marry the desktop clicks with what's going on in the underlying digitized business process. So that, I think, is exactly sort of the question getting to there. So we call that click discovery. And what we actually do is look at the clicks on the desktop married up against changes in the data in the underlying operational systems that you've digitized. Now, where I think you have challenges is if people are doing things on Post-it notes on their computer, monitor, or or if you're taking paper tickets, right? I'm not sure anyone can help you in those contexts. Probably time to move to an ERP system. But I think there's a lot of work that's done sort of across digital systems on the desktop, and Celonis is working with the clickstream analysis to really understand that process married against those underlying digital processes.
I guess it's the usual story, isn't it? You've got to decide before you automate something whether you're going to go for the stuff that's really easy to automate, or the stuff that once it's automated, it might be a pain to do it, but once it's automated, it's going to give you those really nice returns, like knocking that process down in half from 31 days to 16 days. So what do you think is better? Do you customize the things that do you automate the things that are easy to automate, or do you automate the things that are going to give you the best return in the long run?
Right. So I think it's always best to start with places where you're going to get large returns. But I think that's where the RPA Scout is so valuable. With the Celonis process mining technology, you can look for places where you have high or low automation rates, but high volume of transactions, where the process is relatively standardized. So there you're sort of getting the best of both worlds. You're getting a situation where you can easily apply automation technology because there's no high variation in the process. And you're going to get huge returns of that. And early in an RPA initiative, that's exactly where you want to focus your energy, because you want to show to the organization, hey, there's real value here, right? You start with something which is easy, but no value. People think it's a toy. But you want to start with places where there's high value, but where it's relatively easy.
Okay, useful stuff. I've got a message here from Alexandru Timar, who says, how do you calculate the level of automation on activity level? How do you transition from high-level granularity to low-level granularity on the data side within one process?
Yeah, great question. So when we're looking at the underlying operational system, and an example like SAP, just to use an example, when there's a transaction in the system and it's entered into the log, we take note of whether that was performed by a automated task, like an API call, or a batch, which is typically by a user. So in other words, we can know whether, and in fact, in Celonis, you can know which user performed the action. So we know at a quite detailed level, what change in the underlying data, when a change in the underlying data occurred. Did it occur because a person changed it, or because an API call changed it? And again, we can do that across many different systems. The second part of the question, which is transitioning from high to low levels of granularity, is a really important question. One of the challenges in any demo of process mining technology is to be able to see both that simple overview of the business process, like I showed, and all of the variation in that process. And in a way, that's sort of one of the key advantages to Celonis, is being able to see both the detail and the sort of most common path in a simple visualization, and then navigate between those. And it's not that one is good and one is bad. They're both important. Sometimes you want the detail, and sometimes you want to see sort of the overview. But hopefully that answers both of those questions.
Sure. I mean, speaking of having an overview, this is from Anthony Bustinelli, who says, as well as an analytical tool, the benefits of which are obvious, can the Celonis product also be subsequently used as a business process documentation tool, which incorporates standard operating procedures so that after the analysis phase or the RPA implementation, it becomes a business process repository tool as well?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. That is absolutely the case. Again, not not something I had time to show from a demo perspective, but one of the really powerful capabilities in Celonis is to be able to take a process and actually generate from that the BPML model of that process. And then, and this is really powerful, be able to take the as-is transactions up against that BPML model, up against the, as I think the questioner asked, called it the standard operating procedure, and see what level of compliance you have with the documented process. And one of the things we see with implementation of RPA is customers wanting to increase the level of compliance with the standard their standard operating procedure, their standard business process. And obviously that's a real value of RPA, because you can ensure compliance with an underlying process. And again, with Celonis in the mix, you can then track that over time, monitor, and make sure that you're actually getting that compliance.
Okay. IC has come back and just said, do I understand right, Celonis sits on top of an ERP. Is that right?
Yeah, so I would say that Celonis sits on top of any operational system. Obviously, a lot of the processes we've talked about on this call, purchase to pay, order to cash, these sorts of things are typically in an ERP, but we see many other business processes like lead to opportunity on top of a system like Salesforce. This is a little, we actually use Celonis internally in our product development process on top of Jira, right? So we're looking at how you track tickets through a ticket management system. So, we have a lot of customers that are using Celonis on top of ServiceNow or IT service management business processes. But the better way of saying that is that Celonis needs to sit on top of an operational system so that we can understand those digital footprints and then recreate the underlying process.
Okay. Dan Amasai has just dropped his line to say, could you give us an indication of the licensing model and the cost? I guess the cost is going to depend on what you exactly want out of it, but what's the licensing model?
Yeah, so we look at the underlying business process as the indicator for the licensing model. Again, I think what I tried to show in the demo, and frankly through the presentation as well, is building the business case around the application of automation. So again, the tool actually will generate the business case and help show the value of applying, in this case, RPA technology, or of improving the underlying process in a hard dollar case, really, or hard euro case if you're using different currency, to the value of applying that technology.
Great. I'm going to leave it just a slightly bigger question, really, for you, Anthony, and that is that all through this week I've been hearing quite a lot about citizen developers, and I've, both on this conference and outside. And I just wondered, do you see this as being something that's going to be more, we're going to see a lot more of it, people developing their own ideas, and you're not going to have to be a quote-unquote expert to do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, I think that's this idea of democratizing the change, I think, is really a critical idea. And then broadly, so we talked about this a little bit in the RPA case. RPA is really the democratization of automation, right, which typically would have been central and through IT. But more generally, process mining technology is about how do you engage the whole company in transformation. So rather than thinking about transformation as a central activity, which comes from on high, how do you really engage everybody in the organization to help make their business a better business? How to make them help the organization work better? So again, I hope it's clear from the presentation. Automation, RPA are incredibly powerful tools for democratizing automation, but there's a ton of organizations, a lot organizations can do to improve their business. Changing or improving your process, changing underlying systems, engaging people as part of that change. That's they're really people, process, and technology is how you transform a business. Celonis is valuable across all three.
Okay, Anthony Dayton, thank you very much indeed. And to those of you listening, if you've got any other questions for Anthony, you can either get in touch with them through LinkedIn or you can get in touch with them through us. Any other spare questions that we have here, we are gonna box up and send over to him wrapped in tissue and with a nice bow on top. But before we leave you entirely, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sally Fletcher, who is the co-chair of this conference, and she has some takeaways for you, just covering up the whole of the conference as it's been. So Sally, take the floor.
Thank you, Ian. Great. So just before we let you go, I'm just going to take 5 minutes to recap on some of the key takeaways from each session that we heard this week. So first up, day one, we had inside Lego's continuous improvement strategy. So what did that teach us with Peter Evans, Global Continuous Improvement Director at Lego? First of all, Lego, not ego. So all about teamwork, leadership, and really kind of getting involved from all from senior level to baseline. They looked at the beginning, so there was lots of change, but little improvement. We had one hammer, and every problem looked like a nail. Implemented a set of lean practices to solve that, beginning by starting again and rethinking things in a different way, and finishing off with getting a shared understanding of continuous improvement. Next up, we looked at, with UiPath with Dave Marcus, the VP of Digital Process Automation Strategy, we looked at accelerating the future of work. And so some things that we learned from that session is RPA and BPM are complementary, not competitive. When you're starting the journey to RPA, you need to know why you are starting the journey, what the technology is, and your capabilities. How to plan for the right RPA capabilities, look at your infrastructure readiness, IT and business partnerships, speed of execution, pipeline readiness, and change management. And finally, digital workforce is more than just a number of bots. It's about creating communities of digital workers on demand and even including it as part of your hiring process. Next up, if you missed this session, deliver return on automation with BPM. Appian and NPS Kinetic talked to us about measuring manual processing time to prioritize effort. So they looked at before AI, you need to leverage rules engine and enable slow learning. Begin with simple AI options, then algorithms for recommendations. And finally, let the algorithm decide. They also taught us that AI is not one size fits all. Clients have different needs. There will be no one AI to rule them all, so shop around. Choose the best AI for your specific needs and incorporate the algorithm into your own design. Our final session for day one, enhance the ROI of your BPM with process mining with Minute. And they taught us to don't forget the costs, hidden costs of BPM. So as well as standard costs such as insurance, replacement of equipment, contracts, you must look at the involvement of personnel, non-standardization, and cost of reworking if needed. Why do we fail? Using automation as a band-aid was a big thing, and that was actually mentioned throughout the presentations over the next 3 days. Band-aid came up several times. And ensure accountability for your BPM project at the top level. Day two, so 2 sessions on this day, concept to Kaizen, so business process management at AFLAC with Nicholas Heimer, the Senior Process Transformation Manager at AFLAC and Signavio. They looked at practice creating a long-term sustainable solutions, not Band-Aids, so that's another Band-Aids. Ensure the process is scalable, reduce handoffs, and is easy to read. Figure out what gets the customer excited and have laser focus on that. And never stop improving. So customer expectations will continue to evolve. New tech comes out, stakeholders want strong returns. Once you've finished, you need to keep improving. And automation visibility and enterprise mobility. James Morgan and Neil Young talked to us about how the largest road construction project in the UK transformed their processes. They begin by understanding the pain points, manual processes, excessive paperwork, lost documents and poor governance, for example. Look at evaluating high-value processes for automation and look at all types of processes. Everyday processes, organizational specific, and CX processes. Day 3, nearly finished, don't worry. Day 3, we looked at 4 accelerators essential to your digital transformation with BPM Online. They said the world is accelerating. Pedestrians on the street are walking 10% faster than a decade ago, which I can definitely say that's the case for my husband. From now until 2020, the amount of information will double in every 2 years. 72% of Fortune 500 companies feel the single greatest challenge limiting their growth is technology, which is very, very surprising considering how much technology abounds us. Rapid adoption is critical to success and change is the new normal, and businesses need to be able to adapt at will. Following that, we looked at pushing process automation to the edge of the enterprise with Dinesh and Neil from KissFlow. They taught us to empower your teams, overcome the IT bottleneck, and give the power to the end users, not IT. Provide them with a no-code platform they can develop for themselves. This means 20 times faster from idea to application. And finally today, this morning we learned from Andrew Murphy at K2 on digital transformation, BPM and RPA. Andrew looked at BPM and RPA are in flux, and by 2020, 60% of app development will be done outside traditional IT teams. AI is changing the game, and BPM and RPA must innovate and leverage AI. He said solutions today are a mashup of technologies and consider analytics, data, and connectivity before investing. And finally, that BPM will provide you with insights into key areas to apply RPA for measurable and immediate success. Last but not least, we just had Anthony David, CMO of Celonis, talk to us about Siemens' fast lane to RPA success. He said that very few occupations are candidates for full automation. However, almost every occupation has partial automation potential, so giving us some food for thought. He also said that every RPA journey needs process mining to accelerate implementation and safeguard benefits, and that you can also use it to identify manual process steps and help monitor how RPA bots are actually used. So that's everything from me and from the PEX team. I want to take the opportunity to thank all of our sponsors and our speakers for taking the time to put together their thoughts and deliver those presentations. If you're interested, these are the future events that are coming up. We have our PEXcast with Kai Kirkwood at UiPath, followed by AI Live EMEA, the 5th to 7th of November, if AI is something that particularly interests you. BPM Live APAC will be taking place on the 27th of November, so if you're dialing in from the Asia-Pacific region, you might want to take part in that. And Digital Transformation Online, which is actually next week, and we're covering a whole range of different topics related to digital transformation. So that's all from me. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.